I'm here with Kareem Amin, the CEO of Clay, number one mid-stage company on the Enterprise 30 list that we did with Wing. And so this is our second video after talking to Paul Klein, the browser-based CEO, digging into companies that are now thrust on my radar where I'm like, oh, I want to know everything about what you guys are doing. Kareem and I were on a panel the other day at NASDAQ celebrating the Wing 30 list, and happy to have you on the podcast. Hey, Kareem.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Eric.
Great. Well, yeah. So I think, we sort of want to get to like, how did you get to number one on the mid-stage list and then where you're going? If, the best place to start is how was Clay founded? And I think, you guys have been at this a while. Yeah. Tell me about the early days.
Yeah, so we started uh, over maybe just 7 years ago. The motivating idea was how do we give the power of programming to an order of magnitude more people? So we were very much in this continuation of the idea of how do you make programming accessible. And the reason we wanted to do that is that we knew that if you could essentially have that power, you would be able to level up kind of like the type of work that you're doing and just have access to capturing a lot of more of that value. And we were anticipating that there will be more and more kind of like AI set of features that would automate work. Obviously, we were not kind of like seeing that LLMs would be
What
the
year?
way
What
to do
year
that.
was Clay founded?
2017. Yeah,
And who
but there
was
were some cool.
the first customer type?
Great question. I think when you look back at it, yeah, you do need to have a clear customer and you need to have all of like who's your TAM and all of that stuff. But I don't think that most people, I think that's just one way of like articulating your idea. Like we started off from what is it that we want to have in the world? And then we thought, okay, well, if we want to give the power of programming to more people, do we want to give it to engineers and make them a lot faster? Or do we want to give it to non-engineers? And we started kind of exploring to see like what is possible. At that time, there was already things called programming by example. So in Excel, I haven't talked about this actually before, but you could go in and let's say that you had like a phone number and some of it was missing the brackets around the first three digits. You could add it and you show kind of Excel like, okay, you add it once and it can add it to all of them.
Hmm.
But sometimes it would add a double bracket. So you go delete that one. And now it learns, okay, if there's a double bracket, don't do that. And so we started to say, okay, there's going to be more and more ways to program by example, to program by showing the machine what you want. And we were kind of exploring like, what is it, what's possible today? We eventually decided that actually it's much, much more powerful to give it to non-engineers. And we started thinking about like, what are the metaphors that people understand and decided, okay, the spreadsheet's the world's most popular programming environment. And Google made it collaborative, so many people could work on it at the same time. But the next step was to make it connected to all of the internet's data. And so that's kind of like how we came to Clay, because once we did that, we were like, well, who is going to use this? And there could be financial analysts or there could be people building lists. When we looked at people building lists, it was recruiters, salespeople, marketers, customer success people. And so we decided to focus it on go-to-market teams. So I think at the end of the day, you need to focus it on who you're selling it to get the product going, to build the business. But it's ultimately in service of this bigger goal.
And so just the core customer action so that people just understand, like, if
Yeah.
I were going to use the product, the way that most people use it, first off, is what?
The core customer action is you want to grow your business, right? And to grow your business, you need to build a list of potential new customers or existing customers that you want to reach out to. And you need to figure out what properties predict that someone's going to be a good customer. So Clay allows you to aggregate all the data sources on the internet to build the list of potential customers that you want to message. Using those data points, you can figure out what you're going to say to them. So let's say you find all the people on the internet who don't have SOC 2 compliance but are SaaS companies that have been built, and you sell a SOC 2 compliance product. That's a perfect moment for you to reach out to them.
So was that possible pre-LLM, or how much of the product really existed before sort of the model explosion?
Yeah. It was totally possible pre-LLMs. There were all these different data providers that scraped data from the web and packaged it. What was difficult, so that's what we did first was say, okay, like why use one data provider when you can use all of them? And it depends on what you're looking for, which data you need, and makes it easier for you to work with that data to build the list. What LLMs made it possible to do was to then also get unique data properties that no data provider kind of had. So let's say you want to say, I want to find all companies that have remote offices in South America, right? And maybe that information you could kind of extract from existing data providers, but it would take a lot of work because you would have to say, okay, do they have an office in South America and an office outside, and where is the headquarters? And that means that they have a remote office in South America.
So it extracted a lot more value out of these data sets that you'd gotten together because there's more of a
Exactly, yeah.
logic and sort of pulling out
Right.
pieces.
Yeah, and you could do more real-time things, right? So you could say, check if this company has the logos of some of our current existing customers, right? So you can do things that maybe you'd have humans, SDRs, normally do.
Do customers pay to use all the different data sources, or you just license it yourself and it's abstracted away from them, or how much interaction do they have with the
Yeah,
actual
we have
data
an interesting
sources?
model here. So basically, you can use most of the data sources using Clay credits, right? Because we have licenses with them.
Hmm.
If you already have a contract or agreement with a data provider, you could just use your API key in Clay.
Hmm.
And it's free to do so. So our idea is very much a collaboration with data providers. We focus on a segment of the market that they don't normally have the resources to sell to. And some of the data providers are smaller. They have really high quality data, but they just don't have the full UI or go-to-market team to sell it.
Hmm.
So, and the other thing is once a customer grows big enough, we prefer that they actually have a connection to the data provider and they have a direct kind of like contract and API key with them.
Do
Our
you
belief is that, yeah, we don't necessarily make the money off of selling the data. It's how you make use of the data to create a campaign that we think is like where we provide value.
Yeah, and then on sort of the content generation side and sort of the outreach scheduling, how much are humans in the loop? Or like how much is it sort of still a human firing off emails versus setting all these triggers? Or how do you think about that?
The way we think about it is humans are there to come up with the ideas, like which triggers, when, how often, to whom. We just facilitate doing all of that work. So the way to think about Clay is like if Figma is for designers, Clay is for go-to-market teams. You're still involved, but it's a creative tool that allows you to express your idea quickly. We don't necessarily believe that there is one solution that fits all, or that there's like one magic button that you should turn on and let it go. You have to constantly be iterating on who are you? What are the guesses that you think makes a good customer and what predicts that? What should you be saying to them? Your products are changing, their products and their needs are changing, so you need to stay up to date. And you also need to stand out from the crowd.
Does this only work if it's like, oh, I can sort of A/B test my customers and there's a huge universe? Like, if I have a business where I'm sort of like whale hunting, is AI as useful where it makes sense to focus a lot of
Totally, yeah.
energy on a
Because it's
particular?
right, because it's not just for outbound, right? Clay is letting you build, let's say, a deep research dossier about this customer, right? You might want to figure out, how many people have they hired in a particular
Hmm.
department? What is their organizational structure? What have they been publishing lately? Right? You can look at their financial statements if they're public. So what are their actions online? What are they doing on social? You can like do social listening. And you don't have to send them a message. You could send all of that information to your own team. The other thing is that, I think of outbound as similar to advertising. So Coca-Cola still advertises. You need to have it on your mind. So just you need multiple touch points for someone to know who you are
Right.
and why you matter. So and even example, think and Clay isn't just to be used to find new customers, it's also to expand your existing customers.
Hmm.
So imagine that you're Figma, you release this new like product dev mode, and maybe you reach out to all of your customers who have a lot of designers, but they none of the engineers have onboarded, and you figure out who their head of engineering is, and you message them and say, hey, your designers are building a lot in Figma. Should your developers be using it too?
Do you send the actual email through Clay?
And so we basically connect to a bunch of third parties to send the email, but we have an interface that allows you to draft
Okay.
it and figure out
Got it.
what you're doing. And the reason we stay kind of separated from the channels is that people do all kinds of things with Clay. So there are companies that send physical mail with Clay, that send gifts, personalized gifts, that have created personalized websites. So people have created personalized ads. So we're kind of agnostic about where the end channel is.
You've obviously been intentional about the product. Besides sort of coming up with a great feature set, like what explains your like explosive growth at the moment, or what would you point to that's sort of like really clicking for Clay and why you're having this moment where investors are so excited about what you're doing?
I think investors are excited because they see kind of the potential that is made possible through Clay. So if every company needs to grow, right? And there are only three ways to grow. You either find new customers, you convert existing ones, or you expand existing ones. Play helps with all three, right? But we found a particular kind of gap in the market, which is that most tools in go-to-market want to sell you a solution that helps you automatically grow your company. It's sold to reps or people who are on the front line and lets them kind of like pull a list quickly and send some messages. Whereas what Clay does is it assumes that there is a new type of role, RevOps, growth marketing. We call them go-to-market engineers, and we think that AI has actually enabled this new role that's going to be really well paid and really expansive, that is a more technical person that can take on that job and can 10x the whole team. And you don't need to A/B test things, right? It doesn't have to be that scientific. It's mostly like you have an idea, we can turn it into reality quickly. And so I think we're the first creative tool in the go-to-market space that actually allows you to speed up any idea to reality. And you can apply that for sales or for marketing or customer success. So the TAM is huge, and people are making a lot of money using Clay and also getting promoted using Clay. So that's why customers like it.
If you get this tool, you're gonna, yeah, get a promotion. On the flip side, is it hard to get a company to embrace a new tool when you say, oh, you need really to rethink what employees you have if you have Clay, or like, isn't that sort of normally it's like we want to meet you where you
Yeah.
are so that you're excited to
So we
do it.
meet you where you are, right? Like the role already exists. It's called RevOps. I think it's just evolving. Also, advanced AEs or SDRs can pick it up.
Hmm.
So it's basically you start off where you are, and then you can essentially parlay it into this job once you prove that it's working. So we tend to kind of meet people where they are, and then they quickly find that they're getting results, and then it transforms into. And don't forget that this is a particular moment where people are willing to experiment because they're like, what is our
Right.
go-to-market strategy with AI? And the answer is you should be using Clay.
What can you say about number of customers, size of the business, employees, whatever snapshot you can give?
Right. So the last public numbers that we gave out were in the Forbes article when we announced our raise at 1.25 billion, and we had 5,000 customers and over 30 million ARR. And we've grown substantially since then.
The jobs question. I mean, do you have an intuition on whether AI is going to reduce the number of jobs, or from your sector, like how, I mean, if you sort of, 10xing or more the capacity of an employee, does that sort of imply fewer employees, or how do you think about that?
My current sense is very much embodied in like things that are like previous technologies that we've encountered. So, when you build more roads, you just get more cars. I think that our system is set up to, regardless of the efficiency gains, to do more. And so let's say we get more efficiency gains. Well, we're just going to want to try to grow faster. We're not going to say, okay, great. Now we can grow as fast as we did with fewer people.
Right.
I think some people will do that. And hence you have a lot of people coming out saying, oh, we're going to build like a 10-person company with like 10 million per employee, and maybe you're satisfied with that. But I think there's going to always be competition at the top for markets where winner takes all, where you will try to do more. So I don't think that you will have fewer people. I think you will have more productive people in certain elements of the business, and you will find new areas where things weren't doable before, weren't worthwhile. The other thing is, I think a lot of the current predictions are predicated on LLMs becoming 1 to 2 orders of magnitude better. And I think that that is different, right? If it becomes 2 orders of magnitude better, I do think many of the jobs will become less needed, but I'm not totally sure. I don't have an intuition on where we are towards that.
Do you spend a lot of time as the CEO of a very forward-thinking AI application company gaming out like AGI strategy, or so much of the business is like new model comes out, figure out how to make use of it, and we react when they come? Or like how much is there sort of like war gaming going on inside Clay about what the capacity is going to be?
I think, what I've told the team in general is 90% of your time should be executing, 10% meta reflecting on anything. Otherwise, you're wasting your time. And so we're focused on delivering with what we have now. There's already a lot. And 10% of the time we think about the future and what are the possible kind of options. But regardless of what the options are, we will be in a better place the more successful we are right now.
Right.
Yeah, to make a
Um,
decision.
how do you think about, so I use Superhuman a lot.
Yeah,
Different products, interested in using Clay. Every sales product or, could be a reporter tool. And
totally.
obviously, we have customers too now, but, Superhuman or email providers, it can feel a little bit like you're fueling a war on both sides, where it's like you're making it easier to email people, but you're also making it easier to like then filter out sort of the
Right.
emails. How do you think about it with your product? I mean, you're more focused on arming sort of one side of the equation, but do you think, oh, there's just going to be another AI company on the other end that's making it filtering out all this like emails
Yeah.
messaging that I'm going to receive?
Yeah. Yeah. But I think yeah, I mean, I love Superhuman and Rahul. I think they've done a great job. I think that, have you ever heard of the idea of the Red Queen? I think there's
I have. It's been a while. I feel like it came up in the
yeah.
Uber context.
Right. I think the author was Matt Ridley. The idea is that, the Red Queen keeps running and stays in the same place, right? So, and I think it was about viruses and like human genomes and like you're constantly changing and meeting it. So there's always this cat and mouse game. I think it just depends on how you approach it, right? So we are not thinking about how do we give people the power to send more messages. Quite the opposite. We think that you should be doing deeper research ahead of time, send fewer messages, do it over time, right? You don't want to blast your whole TAM or all of your customers. You don't even know if it's going to work. So you should pick smaller segments that are deeply researched, spend the time deeply researching them, and then send a more worthwhile message. We just help you do that at a scale where it becomes feasible. And we give you the tools to do that. That's why we don't own kind of like the messaging channel because we don't know what you're going to send and we're not responsible for that. If your product sucks, your message won't work, regardless of who you target and what you say. So that's also information, right? And that information is helpful. I think it doesn't make sense to claim that we will help you grow regardless, because what you're selling might not be worth growing. And
If there are
helpful
good
feedback.
customers out there that fit, we'll help you find them, but we can't promise
Right.
that
Well,
there will
yeah,
be.
we'll help
Yeah.
you figure out how to go about doing that. And
Right.
so I think we're much more aligned actually with customers and people sending messages that are worthwhile. And we try to guide people to use us in this way. Because by the way, if you don't use us correctly, you're the one who's going to get banned, not us.
Get banned just by like email providers if you're sending too many
By email
messages. Or,
providers, yeah, exactly. Or like by, ad messages, or you're the one who's not going to get the results. And
right.
so, yeah, I think that's a key element of it.
Can you walk me through just like one of the most interesting customer case studies?
Yeah, for sure. There's a couple, I won't name the names right now, but 'cause some of the case studies are on our website, but I want to tell you a couple of them that we don't have on the website
Sure.
that I think are great. One company actually sent us a message where they started looking at our status page, and seeing whenever our product was down or had issues. And then they were a DevOps tool and they would see what we said was the issue and they'd be like, well, if you were using us, you wouldn't be down, and here's why.
Hmm.
And it was very effective. I read it. And so I thought that was a pretty creative way of like there are no data sets that look at status pages, but they used our AI agent to monitor us.
Huh.
There's another company that is looking at
To double
yeah.
click on that, like they built a tool or like how?
No, so they used Clay as AI agent to look at our own status page and monitor it to see whenever we said that we were down, looked at the reason that we were down, matched it to one of the products that they could sell to us, and then sent us a message. You
Play
were
has a
down.
tool that sort of triggers when websites are down in real time or?
No, that's the beautiful thing. We have an AI agent that you can program to do whatever you want, including look at our status page.
Hmm. Interesting.
Right. So what's great is that we don't need to have a tool for every possible use case. Actually, customers discover new use cases.
But are they then they're hosting a tool they built on Clay, or that becomes a tool that all Clay
No,
customers can use,
no,
or
no, no, no. It's just they told the AI agent to go look at our status page and then message us when there's an issue and tie it to their products. We can then take that use case and make it more templated for everybody
right?
else.
Yeah.
And that's something that we can choose to do, but we don't have a marketplace where you can then sell that strategy
Oh, I
yet.
see. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Got
yeah,
it.
yeah.
That's a super interesting one.
Yeah. There's another one that I think is pretty cool where company has a way of kind of doing brand normalization. So it's just like, is your brand the same in every channel that you're using it? So they use Clay to look at like a company's brand identity. Then they look at all the social channels that they send messages through. And whenever they see a discrepancy, they message the company and say, hey, you just tweeted out something that doesn't match your brand identity. You could have been using our tool to have
Oh,
brand consistency.
interesting.
So these are very unique go-to-market
Right.
strategies. And what's amazing about this is that it's very custom to your company, but the tools that you need to do that are not custom. They're the, Clay primitives, and that's obviously why we're called Clay, because you can build different things with it.
Right.
The same way that every website, could look completely different, but you can still build it in Figma.
Do you allow customers like how much this is going to reveal how non-technical I am, but like direct like API access or like, I feel like one trend in the AI world is like we're only an API business and you could sort of flow through us without really interacting with our interface. It sounds like what you're describing though is the opposite, where it's like we have a great interface, you'd want to go through Clay. Or how do you think about the rise of, these sort of API first businesses?
Right now, we don't have a public API for you to do that. Sometimes we work with companies to enable that, but I think it depends who the customer is, right? Is the customer an engineer or is the customer a non-engineer? And so we believe that the more features we make in our UI, the faster you can build some of these things without needing an engineer. And then there's obviously also room for engineers to use some of the capabilities that Clay has via API to build things themselves. That's something that we'll be looking at in the future.
I want to ask you a couple questions about sort of AI applications broadly and where things are headed. Any, I guess, last words on Clay or like, where you'd like to be in sort of 2 years or any other reflections that I haven't covered on your business
Um,
before I ask you to play pundit for a second?
I think that the thing that's so exciting about Clay is that we have this really large community. So there's over 20,000 people in our Slack channel. There's clubs in over 40 cities. We just opened out like a funding round, a community funding round that was
Hmm.
uh, um, basically allowed our own community to invest because we're getting ideas from the community so that they should share our ability to grow. But I think we've created this new go-to-market engineer role that is a really like powerful persona where you're able to kind of control all of like the third party data that you can find on the internet about a company and then your own first party data. So like let's say someone's been using your product a lot but stopped using it recently, but would use it if you
Hmm.
released a new AI feature. You should message them, or has been complaining in gong calls about your support, and now you've improved your support.
Yeah.
So this go-to-market engineer can turn all of these ideas for growth into reality. And I think those people are getting promoted really quickly, starting agencies as well to help other companies making a lot of money. And so in 2 years, we want this to be a role that's in every company. Each one of these companies is using Clay to grow.
The idea of like a service provider who's using your tool to then sell it to other companies. I mean, it's funny because you're also seeing AI businesses, in the legal space, there's sort of an ongoing debate
Right.
of whether you should be the service business that uses your secret AI tools or sell the AI tool. Yeah, I don't know. Do you worry at all? Like, oh man, if you can build a company to sort of consult just using Clay, we should be sort of selling those consulting services, or how do you think about that ecosystem?
No, we're very much wanting to partner with that ecosystem, and we have a very large number of people making a lot of money building on top of Clay. It's a small percentage of our revenue. Most of our companies use it directly. But if you look at HubSpot, for example, about half of their ARR comes from basically revenue that a consultant has touched. And so you can build a very big business doing that.
Right. Yeah, we almost signed up for HubSpot, and it's like, oh, we'll give you this person to
Yeah,
architect it all. It's like, oh my God, I'm
right.
going to be spending this money forever. I'm never going to get out of it.
That's exactly what they want.
Right. I walked away at the last second. But I know I said I was going to move on from Clay, but it's super interesting. I mean, how much are you learning from Figma? I mean, I hear like community centric. Are you allowing employees to start using Clay before the company starts paying for it? Or what is sort of the adoption sort of journey for most companies?
No, we have a reverse trial, so you get all the features for 2 weeks and then you have to pay.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we have a free tier, but we are really selling to people who have a product that they want to grow.
Right.
So our profile is a little bit different than like
It's
Figma
not
or
the rogue
Notion.
employee. It's sort of like, oh no, this company is sort of deciding to
Yes.
consider using it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. And that's a better fit for us.
Yeah. Because it's how come just more intense or it's like,
Well, it's just more that you need to have something to grow before you can grow it, right?
right.
Whereas some other products, like if you're in Figma, you might draw something. It doesn't really matter if the thing exists or not, and you can
Right.
still be playing around there. So it
Yeah.
makes a bit more sense. We're more closely tied to revenue. Once you start making revenue, we can help you grow that. And
Right. Yeah. Which is why investors are excited. It's like we're close to the
right.
money. You can see that you're making
You
more
can
of
see
it.
the effect. Yeah, yes, for sure. And don't forget that the biggest SaaS company in the world, Salesforce, is basically a go-to-market kind of like toolkit. Like it's
Hmm.
ostensibly a CRM, but really it's everything that you need to have the information so that you can grow your company.
Do you have the CRM piece of it too, or?
No, I don't think that that's kind of where we want to be. We are
Okay.
a system of action, not a system of record.
I like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
What lessons do you think, other startup founders can learn from Clay in terms of building applications, like whether it's the relationship with model companies that you've taken or sort of anything else that you think is sort of more broadly applicable that you can give away in other
Right.
categories?
I think that the key thing, without knowing a specific situation, the core ideas, I think, are you have to have alignment between the various parts of your business. So, like, what is your product, right? And how does that align with your go-to-market motion? How do they feed into one another, right? So, where do you start? And then how do you take it to the next step? Those things need to make sense, right? So, if you are, I'll give you an example, right? We knew that we wanted to have a PLG-driven business. So, like, people can come and sign up for the product. They don't need to have a demo. So, we built the product so that you can use it without needing a demo. And then we figured out who has the most acute problem that is similar to the one we want to solve. And it turns out that there's all these B2B agencies that are helping people grow their companies, but they are at the forefront actually because they're helping so many different companies. So they have the most complicated set of problems. And if we solved theirs, they would go and talk to other people about us. And so we knew that we could help them. And then we can also do the same thing and go directly to companies. The use case is not
Hmm.
different. The functionality isn't different. The feature set isn't different. If you're going to help someone and then jump to another set of customers and the functionality is different, that's too far of a leap. It needs
I
to be
see.
kind of concentric circles
Right.
that are overlapping.
You
Yeah,
want
like
your successes to sell your product to somebody else without having to build something totally new.
exactly. And then you need to have the sales motion to be aligned. You can't start PLG and then suddenly be like, well, everything needs to be sales based in the future because you built a different culture. And you also have to have a unique insight, usually by turning something on its head. So you could build the simplest tool in the world, or you could build a more complicated tool. You need to figure out where are you on that spectrum. And you could build a tool for everyone to use, right? Or one person to use. And those end up those assumptions change what you build.
What do you make of this idea that, sort of, I don't know, software companies are screwed, or it's like if I'm going to build, I mean, you talk about Salesforce, that was sort of the
Right.
situation with Klarna. It's like I'm going to build my own Salesforce so I won't have to pay them. Like, is it just you have to sort of outrun the capacity of somebody to build it internally, or you think that's sort of overhyped, or what do you think about this idea that every enterprise just builds any application that becomes core to what it's doing?
Yeah. I mean, that was already happening, right? It just depended how willing you were to spend money on this and how willing you are to kind of set up a team to do this. So a lot of people had Clay-like things internally, the same way that people had built CRMs internally before Salesforce. So there's always a build versus buy conversation in software, whether it skews more to build now because it's cheaper. I think the question is it's not about building most of the time. It's about maintaining. Everybody
Hmm.
knows this, right? It's the total cost of ownership, right? Who is going to maintain this? Who understands how this thing works? Who already is, knowledgeable? Does this look like something else they've seen in the future, or are they starting from scratch? And I personally like the idea of personalized software, right? That you can build something quickly, some internal tool that you need. I do think that for tasks that you're regularly doing and that look similar across every business, that you will still have software off the shelf that is just built to be very configurable very quickly. So that has tons of integrations, that is easy to manipulate or mold right into whatever you want. So I think that software that is very easy to customize will still be in high demand. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that you're not going to build from scratch. Even if you can build it, the requirements gathering, knowing what to build is still a lot of the work. It's most of the work, by the way.
Right.
Yeah. And
I mean, I
so you're
imagine
going to have to figure that out.
your data relationships give you sort of a pretty big moat if a customer is using
Totally.
a lot
Yeah,
of
yeah.
them and wants this sort of sense that I can pull from a lot of
Right.
different
Well,
sets.
even if they're
But
not
what
using a
happens if
lot of
I'm
them,
mostly just using like one of them all the time? Like, do you worry about that
that's not
customer
possible,
case?
right? Yeah, I'm not super worried about that because everybody has tried to build the one data set that rules them all. But you're working with living entities, people and companies, and there's so many different ways to view that. So there are so many different properties, and you can't have them all. And it's also very different, right? Like you might have data about companies in North America versus companies in Europe. So that hasn't turned out to be the case. There's definitely a moat in all of the data provider relationships and the data cleaning and all that. But I think a lot of the moat is in the workflows, right?
Hmm.
Enabling you to build any kind of workflow quickly, no matter what it is. And then also seeing what are the most interesting workflows and enabling that for everybody else, right?
How much do you adjudicate which data source is more accurate or score it? Or you're like, oh, if you're depending on phone numbers, like we think this is the best source versus leaving it up to the customer to sort of pick between multiple lists.
We do a lot of due diligence before kind of working with a data provider, and we have a team that looks into that and compares kind of like, whatever the data is in a particular, set of functionality like technographics or demographics. But we leave the choice to the customers in the end. We'll be doing more and more of that as we figure out ways for us to be really accurate so that we can actually give really high quality information here.
Right. I love the idea of like truth in AI, and obviously with sort of existing companies, there are actual facts, and so you can sort of decide
Right.
over time like what's real and what's translating into to
Yeah.
the world as it exists. Do
Yeah.
do you use coding apps internally? Or I'm curious, what you guys are obviously super sophisticated. There are lots of them running at each other right now, like Codium, Cursor, Lovable, there's Replit, there's
Yeah.
obviously Claude Code itself, goes straight to the source. Like, what are you guys using and what's your read on how much that's helping Clay build quickly?
A mixture of all of the above. I mean, I think people internally use Cursor. Some people use Windsurf. We don't have a unified kind of
Interesting. You're
ideology.
like, go forth and
Yeah.
use what you want.
I think it's too early to kind of decide. And I think actually letting engineers decide what is best for them. If you're using Bolt or Replit to like whip out, product managers could use this to show like a quick prototype versus if you're using Cursor as your IDE, that's a very different thing. Or
Right.
some people use GitHub Copilot. We're still finding that a lot of like AI code requires, heavy human review, and you also need to know what you're doing and so that you understand what you actually implemented. Otherwise, there are like very subtle bugs that you can introduce. My friend Merrill runs a company, Graphite.dev, that does AI agent like code review. Pretty cool. Yeah, so there'll be AI agents doing the review and then you'll review it. It is helping us to move faster for sure, especially if you're writing a lot of boilerplate. I do think that the barrier is still the ideas, how they all work together, coordinating all of these things, and then being able to bring them to market through a unique kind of go-to-market channel. So
Hmm.
we use Clay internally as well to figure out like what are the tactics we're using to sell Clay. And I think that You don't want to just build a bunch of low quality things.
Congrats, a mid-stage winner, and we'll be following everything you're doing. And thanks for coming on the podcast.
Appreciate it, Eric. Thank you.
Cool.